Welcome to the deep dive. Big thanks to Iseni for sending us this research on fever and antiviral defense.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, we're really diving deep into how our bodies fight off viruses, and especially the role of fever and interferons.
It's fascinating stuff, and the sources you've got really make you think about how we usually deal with fevers.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've all been taught to just grab the Tylenol as soon as we get a temperature.
Right.
But what if that's not always the right thing to do?
That's a good question.
Before we really get going, don't forget to like and share this episode.
Yeah.
And subscribe for more deep dives.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've got some scientific articles for this one,
Sounds good.
some medical commentary from MedCram, and a few summaries of some key studies to help us explore this.
I'm ready.
The big question is, could a fever actually help us fight off viruses like the flu or COVID-19?
Well, that really challenges the old idea that a fever is just a bad thing that we need to get rid of.
Exactly. So let's start with what MedCram says about the basics. They remind us that technically, a fever is defined as a body temperature above 38 degrees Celsius, or 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Got it.
And usually we try to bring the temperature down with medicine, like acetaminophen or ibuprofen.
Yeah, makes sense.
But here's where things get interesting.
Oh.
MedCram questions this whole idea of automatically getting rid of a fever
Oh, really?
and asks, what if lowering your temperature makes it harder to fight the virus?
I never thought of it that way.
And this is where these interferons come in.
Interferons?
Yeah, these are proteins that our bodies make naturally,
Okay.
and they play a huge role in how our bodies fight off viruses.
Interesting.
And MedCram points out a study from the New England Journal of Medicine. It showed that when patients with COVID-19 were given interferon lambda infusions, there was a big reduction in hospitalizations and deaths.
Like how much of a reduction?
39%.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it really seems like increasing your interferon levels can make a real difference in how the disease turns out.
I see.
There's actually some even older research from 1988
Oh, wow.
that showed that hyperthermia, meaning a body temperature of 39 degrees Celsius,
Okay.
led to an increase in interferon-gamma production in human volunteers.
So even back then, they were finding a link between higher body temperature and these antiviral weapons.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
And MedCram actually brings in a historical angle, too.
Oh.
They talk about Dr. Wells Rubble and what he saw during the 1918 flu pandemic.
Oh, wow. That's going way back.
Yeah, so he observed two very different approaches to dealing with fever. So some sanitariums actually used hydrotherapy to increase body temperature,
Oh, wow.
while Army hospitals focused on lowering it with aspirin.
So they had totally opposite strategies.
Yeah, it was pretty striking.
Yeah, what were the results?
Well, the sanitariums that actually used fever as part of their treatment
Yeah.
saw a much lower death rate.
Really?
Yeah, compared to the hospitals that just tried to get rid of the fever.
Wow. So that historical perspective really adds to the idea that maybe fever isn't all bad.
It really does make you question what we've always been told, right?
It does.
So anecdotal evidence is one thing.
Right.
But what does the actual scientific research say about the connection between fever and immunity?
Well, there's a study from 2022 in nucleic acids research that actually looks at how this all works.
Okay, so what did they find?
Well, they found that even just a small increase in temperature from 37 degrees to 38 degrees Celsius,
Okay.
which is before we even hit what's clinically defined as a fever,
Right.
can have a really big impact.
So our bodies are reacting even before we feel feverish.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
This study found that this small temperature increase led to a big increase in the activity of antiviral genes in macrophages.
Macrophages.
Yeah, those are key cells in our immune system.
Got it. So you're saying that even these small temperature changes are getting those macrophages ready to fight off viruses better.
That's exactly what they found.
Wow.
And they also found that this temperature bump specifically activated genes that are involved in the innate immune response.
Importantly, in the production of interferon.
So it's like our bodies are priming the immune system even at the slightest hint of a threat.
Exactly. It's like a chain reaction.
Okay.
The study found that the increased temperature actually triggers the transcription of these antiviral genes.
Transcription.
Yeah, it means it starts the process of making more of these antiviral proteins and enzymes.
So it's like a domino effect, starting with that small increase in temperature.
Precisely.
That's incredible. Did they see this effect in other types of cells too?
Yeah, they actually observed it in primary mouse macrophages and even in human jerkat P cells.
So this isn't just limited to one specific type of cell.
Right. It seems like it's a basic mechanism that's found across different species and cell types.
That's pretty convincing evidence that fever has a role in our immune response.
It really is.
And the 2022 study actually goes even further.
Oh.
They look into this thing called the JAK-STAT pathway.
The JAK-STAT pathway. Yeah, it's this really important signaling pathway that's involved in activating immune cells and producing those interferons.
Oh, wow. So it's like the control center for a lot of immune activity.
Right. So what did they find out about the JAK-STAT pathway and its connection to fever?
Well, it's really fascinating, actually. So they found that just having a higher temperature was enough to activate these SAT2 and STAT3 proteins. And those are like key parts of this JAK-STAT pathway.
Gotcha.
But when they blocked the pathway with this drug called ruxolitinib, that increase in antiviral gene expression that we were talking about from the temperature, well, it just went away.
Oh, wow. So it's like fever is turning on this whole system of antiviral activity.
Exactly. It's like flipping a switch.
That's pretty cool. And it doesn't stop there.
What else does it do?
Well, remember how we were talking about nitric oxide?
Yeah, another one of the immune system's weapons.
Right. Well, the 2022 study found that a higher temperature also increased nitric oxide production.
Huh. Interesting.
And this was especially true when they mimicked an infection in the lab.
I see.
So it really looks like a higher temperature is boosting all these different parts of our immune defenses.
It's not just the individual parts, it's how they all work together.
Right. It's like a whole army working in sync.
Exactly.
So given all this evidence, what does it mean for how we should treat a fever?
Well, MedCram has some interesting thoughts about this.
Okay, what do they say?
They say that obviously high fevers above 104 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 Celsius.
Yeah, those can be dangerous.
Exactly. Those need medical attention right away.
Of course, we don't want people ignoring a serious situation.
Right. But for lower grade fevers, up to 102.2 Fahrenheit or 39 Celsius, they suggest that it might actually be beneficial to let them run their course.
Really? Especially in healthy people.
Especially in healthy people, yeah.
That goes against everything we've been told.
I know it does. It really highlights the importance of personalized care.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. It's so important to talk to your doctor and figure out the best approach for your situation.
Couldn't agree more. We definitely don't want listeners making medical decisions based on just what they hear here.
Right. This is about exploring the science and understanding the nuances, not about replacing professional medical advice.
Exactly. Now, the 2022 study also looked at fever and aging.
Okay. How's that fit in?
Well, they found that if people get older, a lot of the genes that help restrict the SARS-CoV-2 infection, they become less active.
Interesting. And we know that older people often have slightly lower body temperatures, too.
Right, and they tend to get hit harder by COVID-19.
So could this age-related decline in these antiviral genes be related to a less effective fever response?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there's a connection there.
It does. It's definitely an area where we need more research.
For sure. We need to understand these age-related changes better and how they affect the body's ability to fight off infections.
Absolutely. It's crucial for protecting vulnerable populations.
Okay, so let's recap for a sec. We've seen evidence that fever can increase interferon production, boost the JAK-STAT pathway, increase nitric oxide production, and get those macrophages ready for action.
That's a lot.
And it's not just about hitting a really high temperature.
Right.
Even those small increases before we technically have a fever, they can start these processes.
Interesting.
Makes you think twice about reaching for the fever-reducing meds right away.
It does, for sure.
Yeah.
But of course, always talk to your doctor.
Absolutely. Now, I want to go back to something MedCram mentioned.
What's that?
Do you think we could use fever on purpose to help us fight off infections?
Intentionally.
Yeah, they talked about things like hydrotherapy and saunas.
Huh, that's an interesting idea. Could we safely stimulate our immune systems that way?
It kind of goes back to what Dr. Rubble saw during that 1918 flu.
Yeah, where those sanitariums using hydrotherapy had better results.
Right.
It's like we're rediscovering these old practices with modern science.
It really is. This whole deep dive raises so many questions.
I know, right?
Like, could our habit of always trying to suppress fevers actually be hurting our ability to fight off viruses?
It makes you wonder.
Have we made our immune systems weaker by always reaching for the Tylenol?
It's definitely a question worth asking.
For sure.
Yeah.
We need to rethink how we approach fever.
Absolutely.
It's not just about getting rid of it as fast as possible.
Right. We need a more nuanced understanding of how it fits into our health.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. The questions have been great.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Oh, I love a good brain teaser. Hit me with it.
Okay, so we've talked about how amazing our bodies are, right?
Yeah, they can do some pretty incredible
Like
things.
they can heal themselves and they have all these defenses built in.
It's really remarkable when you think about it.
What if we could learn to work with our bodies better instead of always trying to control them?
You mean like tapping into that natural wisdom?
Exactly. So maybe when we automatically suppress a fever,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're actually interfering with something that's trying to help us get better.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
It makes you think, right?
It does. Maybe the future of medicine is about figuring out how to work with these natural processes.
Right, instead of just trying to make the symptoms go away.
Exactly, harnessing the body's own power to heal.
Well said.
Well,
This has been an incredible deep dive.
it really has.
Huge thanks again to Iceni for sending us this research.
Yeah, this was a good one.
I think our listeners are walking away with a whole new perspective on how amazing the human body is.
I hope so. It's such a complex and powerful system.
We encourage everyone to keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah, don't just take our word for it.
Read the research, talk to your doctors, and figure out what makes sense for you.
That's the best part about learning new things.
Right. It gives you the power to make informed decisions about your health.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, stay curious. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives.
Keep those brains working.